Socio Ecological problems, crowding and growth of slums. To depict how slums started growing in India, to characterize the outcome of slums on economic development of the country, to study the health and hygiene problems associated due to crowding, to demonstrate the initiatives taken by various groups of people and government for the welfare of slum areas. In today's session, we are going to learn about the crowding and growth of slums as an impact of industrialization. To start with, let me put up a question to you all. Do you still see people living in thatched houses by roadside, beside garbage sites, sewage canals, etc.? If yes, do you think they lead a decent life? Do they own the land they live in? Does that mean they are rich enough to own property and they are members of property market? The answer to all these questions, the reply I put forward is no. These people do not lead a decent life. They do not own their own land. And therefore, they aren't members of any property business. Instead, these people are categorized under the critically poor group who do not even have a good locality to live in. Hence, they construct their homes with inexpensive materials such as dried thatches or huge pieces of rugs which are available everywhere. In few cases, they don't construct a dwelling. Instead, they stay in large hollow concrete that have been kept along the roadside for construction of pillars. They cannot claim their rights over these things. The land which they live in is usually government's land. Well, why is it necessary for these people to live their daily life in such places in clusters? The main reason is their economic condition. They cannot afford to pay rents for their houses individually. In fact, they cannot even afford a proper balanced meal a day. The children too are the bread earners. Don't you want to know why these group of people are pushed to such a situation? We will learn all about that in the succeeding few minutes. We will discuss about the growth of slums, the economic impact of slums on our country, and the slum inhabitants. One of the most unfavored economic impacts on these people is their own health condition. Finally, these slums cannot be left to expand. There should be some way to improve the quality of lifestyle in slums. This factor has also been discussed in this section. Initialization of slums. In this session, we can discuss how slum came into being in our country. Due to industrialization, the urban population is rising consistently. Urbanization, in terms of population growth in urban areas, has been driven by economic development of that region due to higher employment opportunities in industries. Simultaneously, poverty is also urbanizing. This statement is reflected in poor housing, urban infrastructural support, and social and reproductive health services. The per capita GDP figures are higher in the relatively more urbanized and developed regions of the country, that is, the major towns. This actually reflects the drawing power of cities for rural migrants seeking more economic opportunities. When people migrate from one region to another, for example, from rural areas to urban areas, it results in higher population density in that region. The concentration of economic development in a few cities, and particularly the largest, implies a population boom in very short period of time. This, in turn, tests the coping capacity of city governments. One of the most visible outcomes of the rapid urbanization has thus been the persistence and formation of slums. Rapid urban population growth has outpaced the ability of city authorities to provide for housing, environmental and health infrastructure. In India, cities such as Mumbai are, realistically speaking, metropolitan or urban regions spanning large territorial areas which has a predominant slum settlement. Squatter and slum settlements have formed mainly because of the inability of city governments to plan and provide affordable housing for the low-income segments of the urban population. Hence, squatter and slum housing is the housing solution for this low-income urban population. Part of the problem arises in the coordination among different authorities that are in charge of economic development, urban planning, and land allocation. Such coordination issues exist between city and national governments. The proliferation of slum and squatter settlements shows that planned economic growth has to be aligned with the planned development of health services, environmental infrastructure, and housing. In a situation of scarce resource allocation, frequently, the urban poor are badly placed to compete for essential services. Bias in investment standards, pricing policy, and administrative procedures in favor of the rich deny basic facility to the poor. Thus, the poor are denied shelter, safe water, acceptable sanitation, minimal nutrition, and basic education. In many cities, rapid development of a new real estate comprising shopping malls has led to gridlocked traffic conditions, severe environmental conditions such as air, noise, and river pollution, unstable squatter rental crowded apartments sandwiched between prime commercial complexes. With the intensity competitive demand for land in cities, the urban poor are being marginalized. Many are now settling at the fringes of the most rapidly growing cities. These are characterized by inadequate infrastructure, service provision, and security of shelter and land tenure. In addition to population growth in cities, some people have attributed to the growth of slum settlements to colonial legacies, including an array of factors operating at local and global levels. These factors include town planning and governance, economic dynamics, and lack of genuine political will to address the issue in a fundamentally structured, sustainable, and large-scale manner. Economic impact. We all live in a country in which slum settlements are very common. Since slums are nothing but the dwelling of economically backward people, these areas have a very adverse effect on the economic development of our nation. So, what are the economic consequences of slums? Before finding an answer to this question, let us recall that the main reason for formation of slums is urban growth. When urban growth is properly managed, it can yield significant economic benefits. By urban growth, all we mean is the urban population, which is a source of manpower for stimulating clustered economies, which could enhance economic productivity and encourage innovation in the urban sector. However, unregulated urban growth can produce inefficient and undesirable outcomes in the form of sprawling slums. Yes, I have answered the question now. Slum settlements are fraught with a lot of transaction costs, which includes inadequate infrastructure. Due to this lack of proper infrastructure, transportation costs and the disease burden of urban dwellers increases. As we all know, the slum dwellers do not actually own their land area, nor could anyone claim ownership over that region. Thus, the prevalence of ambiguous property and tenancy rights over the land and houses can reduce the efficiency of urban land and housing markets. This in turn generates insecurity and informality, which may discourage investment or reduce participation of finances in urban labor markets. Rigid or outdated planning frameworks can worsen these problems that I have mentioned by making it difficult for households and firms to comply with zoning, regulations, or building codes. In other words, these are the reasons why slums are high transaction cost spaces. Those people living within a serviced urban core or area with clear titles to their assets and access to public infrastructure face lower transaction costs than those relying on localized tenure security arrangements, that is, slum inhabitants. These people in slums face ad hoc solutions to the absence of essential infrastructure such as water and sanitation. The larger the population of an urban area with slum characteristics, the higher the overall transaction cost burden of the settlement. Levels of income instead of rates of growth are usually considered, as it is assumed that the economic effects of slum incidents would work themselves out over a long period of time. By the term slum incidents, we mean the probability of a slum being established. Thus, in other words, the economic condition of the slum determines its existence. Let's quote a very common example here. If you are given with 500 rupees and an empty house, the first and the most basic expenditure would be, well, on food. Likewise, if you are given say about 50,000 rupees, you may consider luxury items such as buying furniture besides spending on food. More the money you have, more would be the improvement of living standards. Similar is the case with slums as well. If the economic condition of the slums increases, the inhabitants tend to seek a more standardized life, which results in its eradication. It also would result in the improvement of hygiene conditions in those areas, thereby making medical expenses minimum, ultimately resulting in economic development of our country. Given the high variability of short and medium-term growth rates, we would not expect to find a strong association between slum incidents and growth rates in the short or medium run. Thus, income levels are essentially a measure of long-run economic performance. However, slum incidence is also highly correlated with a range of quality of governance variables, including control of corruption, regulatory quality, administration of law in proper manner, government effectiveness, and political stability. Next, let us move on to analyze the health condition of slum dwellers. Many of the health problems in urban slums stem from the lack of access or demand for basic amenities. Basic service provisions are either absent or inadequate in slums. Lack of drinking water, clean, sanitary environment, and adequate housing and garbage disposal pose series of threats to the health of slum dwellers, women and children in particular, as they spend most of their time in and around the unhygienic environment. The demands for basic services are lacking because there is no agency or institution like state government or central government that is willing to assess the needs and on that basis identify and fulfill the demand. Therefore, the urban poor see futility in expressing their demands to those with the capacity to fulfill them. This is the main reason why the health of slums is always undermined. However, supply-side techniques alone cannot solve infrastructure problems. Public sector agencies need to become more responsive to customer needs. Other than that, the engineering or logistical aspects that govern availability of services issues related to land, they also pose serious constraints towards extension of basic infrastructure services to slums that can positively have an impact on health and sanitation. Inadequate nutritional intake due to non-availability of subsidized ration or availability of poor quality ration makes the slum dwellers prone to large number of infections and waterborne diseases. The inability to access basic services results from a series of man-made institutional bottlenecks like legal status of non-notified settlements, or of the scattered poor homeless people. These prevent the poor from accessing services created primarily in their name. Lack of education and information further aggravates the situation as residents depend on unreliable sources for prevention and cure. Even if services like drinking water taps, community toilets and small drains may be sometimes attainable through pressurizing the local councillor or the MLA, it is the officers of the level of commissioner who take the critical decisions or call the shots at the municipal level. A lot of the contracting is done at this level, so it is difficult for the poor to approach the decision makers and put forward demands or ensure that their demands will be adequately fulfilled. If the services are to be made available to the poor, need to be actively involved, not as mere participants, but as active agents who can influence the ideology behind decisions made and bring the focus on the people as users of services. It is of common knowledge that for a healthy body that is strong enough to fight off infectious diseases, nutrition intake must be appropriate and adequate. Residents of slum clusters rely on government subsidies for their ration. These residents come under the Targeted Public Distribution Scheme, that is TPDS, and can avail government subsidies for wheat, rice and kerosene oil for cooking. However, the capital's public distribution system is one of the most mismanaged and corrupt systems in India. Moreover, the difference in the quality of food in the city and that in village is very stark. The unhygienic environment further adds to the health hazards as the body becomes prone to diseases due to improper intake of food. The wheat and desi chana in the villages is much more nutritious than the one available in cities through ration. Women in slums suffer from anemia, weakness and severe headaches. Furthermore, adulteration in cooking oil, milk and wheat flour continuously makes it into the city sections of the newspaper. The implications of consuming adulterated food create further complications as well. Many of these complications go untreated due to lack of information, money and proper medical assistance for the poor. I'd like to enumerate a study report that broadly classifies the proximate cause of ill health in urban slums. Lack of adequate basic services such as toilets, bathing units, garbage disposal and drinking water. Lack of information about proper state-owned and managed medical benefits such as tuberculosis clinics or hospitals. Mistreatment and bad behavior at government hospitals result in a high number of home births or compel the poor to avail or private alternatives. Lack of financial resources to ensure sustained medical attention for skin disorders or joint pains. Development of living condition in slums. Before getting to know what the various government and non-government organizations have been doing to develop slum areas, well, let's see what are the various insecurities faced by slum dwellers. The inhabitants lack a security of tenure and are in a constant fear of eviction. This prevents them from making substantial investments in improvement of their dwelling. Most of the slums are on government land with ownership vesting in the concerned agency. The inhabitants do not have their property rights over their houses. This causes hindrance in obtaining basic facilities from civic agencies. Even if these are provided, these are never at par or comparable to other areas of the city. Most of the houses are very small, comprising of only one room of household. These are shabbily built without any provision for natural light or ventilation. Most of the inhabitants who work as unskilled or semi-skilled laborers are usually below poverty line. Unhygienic living conditions along with poverty create health problems. Large number of children are malnourished and respiratory diseases are very common. Child mortality rate in these areas is the highest in the country. The approach of the government has been positive. Support is also provided through Antyodaya Anna Yojana. This has helped in meeting the food requirements of the urban poor. National Slum Development Program was launched in the year 1996 for upgradation of slums or for providing basic amenities like water supply, roads, street lights, latrines, etc., the program was discontinued in the year 2006. Under this program, around 4.58 crores of people were benefited. The Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission was launched in 2005. This stressed on augmenting urban infrastructure and providing basic services to urban poor. It has 4 components, out of which 2 are basic services to urban poor, and integrated housing and slum development program are focused on development of slum areas. One more scheme, that is the Rajiv Awas Yojana, was launched in June 2009. This aimed at encouraging states or union territories by tackling the problem by bringing the existing slums within the formal system and enabling them to avail same level of basic amenities as the rest of the town. It was done by redressing the failures of the formal system that lie behind the creation of slums and tackling the shortages of urban land and housing that keep shelter out of reach of the urban poor. Apart from the problem of housing, a few schemes were also initiated for providing gainful employment to urban poor. The Nehru Rozgar Yojana, Urban Basic Services for the Poor, and the Prime Minister's Integrated Urban Poverty Eradication Program were some such schemes. These were later merged into Swarna Jayanti Sahahari Rozgar Yojana in the year 1997. The key objective of the SJSRY was to provide gainful employment to the urban unemployment or underemployment through the setting up of self-employed ventures or provision of wage employment. Although government has made efforts to provide education to the children in the slums, enrollment rate is low and dropout rate is very high, as poverty forces the family to send every child to work. Moreover, inhabitants are prone to alcoholism, which results in domestic abuse and other social, economic and health problems. Apart from all these, there have been NGOs set up all across the nation. Most of these NGOs target the development and well-being of slum dwellers. They conduct campaigns to create awareness about children's education in slum areas. A few organizations have come forward to volunteer to take up lessons for school children in slums. Their agenda also involves providing stationeries such as notebooks, study materials, pencils, etc. In addition to all these, donation of clothes, kitchen utensils, home necessities, laying tiled roofs instead of thatched roof, etc. are also part of the mission. Numerous amount of fund is also being collected purely for the development of slum areas. Well, students, it is time to wind up our topic for today. Let us conclude by summarizing whatever we have discussed so far under this topic. In this session, we have discussed about overcrowding of cities as the root cause for formation of slums in India. We categorize the topics as initialization of slums, economic impact, health impact, and development of living conditions in the slums. Under the first topic, we concentrated on explaining how urbanization has led to the formation of clusters called slums. Slums are nothing but small areas of government land which is occupied by the poor, small-scale laborers who have migrated from villages. These people live with minimal basic amenities. It is also evident that the failure of government in implementing proper urban plans has led to unauthorized squatters and settlements of people. These slums could be eradicated if the income level of the inhabitants was increased. This was stressed upon in the second topic, which is economic impact. Besides the economic impact of the slum dwellers, the economic setback of the country due to slums was also discussed. Due to the low income characteristics of slums, the quality of living also suffers. This directly points out the lack of proper hygiene and resulting health issues. Even though the slums are provided with ration, the quality of food, well, is not found to be up to the mark. It worsens the ever increasing woes. Keeping all these in mind, the government has laid certain steps and measures being taken throughout the nation to eradicate poverty and improve the living conditions in slums. Besides government measures, NGOs have taken active roles to participate in development plans.